Good afternoon and welcome to the June 30th meeting of the Kiwanis Club of Birmingham. We are honored to host Admiral Kevin E. Lunday, the 28th Commandant of the United States Coast Guard. Admiral, the Hilltop is a special place for us as one of our past club presidents, Dr. Neil Birdie, you just met one of his sons, Scott, served as president of Birmingham Southern College for close to 30 years. Many of our members are alumni, and we sponsored a college service club there. We thank you for joining us. I'd like to invite Kiwanian Eric Rogers to the lectern to give the invocation and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we'll hear a special welcome to our guests from the mayor.
Will you please bow your heads? Let us pray silently together, offering thanks for our food and the blessings of fellowship around us. Let us be a source of hope for those in need and a source of inspiration for our business community as we uphold our mission of building by serving. Amen. Now join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Eric, and we are honored that a fellow Kiwanian is the mayor of this great city. We're going to do, the Admiral is on a tight schedule and he has got to leave the building at 12:45, so the things that we normally do at the beginning of the meeting we're going to do at the end. But Mayor, we're going to ask you to come on up now and bring a welcome to the Admiral and the Coast Guard.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Kiwanians. I'm speaking of the Commandant having to leave. Let me be brief and succinct by simply saying, as we prepare and to recognize our nation's 250th existence this week, I cannot think of a more appropriate time than to be joined by the Commandant of the U.S. Coast Guard right here at Kiwanis. I had the opportunity to spend a little time today with Admiral Lunday earlier today, and I think you all are in for a treat. Because he's an exceptional leader, an exceptional servant to our country. But as we spend today as a reminder, let's be also reminded that this week celebrating the freedoms of our nation. Allow me to challenge you with this. The city of Birmingham, of all cities, knows two truths. Freedom is not free, and those freedoms are worth fighting for. And while we celebrate 250 years of freedom, I think it's important that we acknowledge that there are many challenges that we need to continue to address for all Americans. So, with that, Admiral, I want to thank you for your service to our country. I want to welcome you and the entire Coast Guard to the city of Birmingham. It is nice to have you all in Birmingham and enjoy your time with us. Thank you so much.
One quick reminder, you know the building is under renovation. The restrooms on this floor are still being renovated, so the operative restrooms on the second floor, best way to get there is up the spiral staircase. I'll say one thing very quickly. When I learned that the Coast Guard was going to buy the Birmingham Southern College campus, I thought, that is the craziest thing I've ever heard of. What idiot made that decision? Did they not know that we're landlocked? And then I was in the Army, 10 years in the reserves. I got to think about all the installations I'd been to. Fort Riley, Fort Drum, Fort Bragg, Fort Benjamin Harrison, Fort Huachuca. Every one of them, you have to have barracks for the troops. Well, Birmingham Southern had dormitories. You got to have a mess hall. Well, they had a very big dining facility. You got to have classrooms for instruction. Check. You got to have an auditorium for convocations, graduation, when the big brass from D.C. come down. Check. You got to have recreational facilities. Check. Admiral, that was brilliant, and it's turnkey. You just walk in and take over. Great idea. Okay. I'd like to recognize the head table, and then we're going to get to the lady who made all this possible. I'm going to say this about 3 times. Virginia Gilbert Lofton, our fellow Kiwanian, who I think President Coleman left Virginia in charge of basically turning out the lights. And so she got to the Admiral first. We're very glad that she brought him here. Okay, let me introduce the head table. The Kiwanian providing the invocation, principal with Progressive Properties, Eric Rogers. Our newest Kiwanian, who will be introduced in a few minutes, the Executive Director of the Court-Appointed Special Advocates, or CASA, of Jefferson County, Kelly Burke. President and founder of Abiona Wealth, past club treasurer, Mary Meadows Livingston. Retired from serving as Senior Vice President and Financial Advisor at Cap Trust, serving today in Secretary Susanna Schuler's absence, past Club Secretary Tim Callahan, 1970 BSC grad, distinguished alumnus of BSC in 2015, and President of the National Alumni Association in 87 and 88. Master Chief Petty Officer of the United States Coast Guard, Master Chief Philip Waldron, former Vice President of Advancement in Communications for Birmingham Southern, former club board member Virginia Gilbert Lofton, and we've already acknowledged Mayor Woodfin. So Virginia, we thank you for making this happen. Come up now and please introduce the 28th Commandant of the United States Coast Guard.
Thank you, John. Have you ever had to part with a place you loved? Maybe it was the house where you raised your children, and then it was time to downsize. Maybe it was the house you grew up in, and then a generation later, it was time to let a new family make it their home. If you have experienced that, and I have on both counts, then you know the very definition of bittersweet. Because even when it's the right move, you also know that the place you called home won't be yours anymore. So you just have to hope the new family will take good care of the place, be a good fit for the community, be a good neighbor to your old neighbors, and love it as much as you did. Today, it is my high honor to introduce you to the head of the new household on the hilltop, whose impressive biography was shared with you in our recent club newsletters. As the 28th Commandant of the United States Coast Guard, Admiral Kevin Lunday leads the 57,000 active reserve and civilian Coast Guard personnel who control our coastal borders and maritime approaches. They protect our ports and our waterways, and they play a leading role in emergency management and in rescue operations. And that head count is growing by the day, which is essentially what brought the Coast Guard to Birmingham. Now, before you ask, and as John alluded to, yes, the Admiral knows we do not have a coast, though we do have 3 or 4 places in which one could land a helicopter, and they have already done that. But as it turns out, the Coast Guard does so much more than go get George Clooney in the middle of a perfect storm, though that is noble work. Much of the training that prepares those 57,000 people to defend and protect us takes place on dry land. And now, as you will hear from the Commandant, a significant portion of that training will happen on a hilltop on our city's western border at the new United States Coast Guard Training Center, Birmingham Southern. Yes, they are keeping the name. Those of us who have come to know the Coast Guard since the first scouting party came ashore in April 2025 are not, and I sent them to Nikki's West that day, and I really think that sealed the deal. We're not just relieved to have found a buyer for the property that Birmingham Southern College called home for more than 100 of its 168 years. We are also confident that the Coast Guard will indeed take good care of the place, be a great neighbor to our old neighbors in Bush Hills and College Hills and Smithfield and the whole city, and will love it as much as we did and always will. I understand we have a video before your remarks, so I think it's time to cue the video.
The United States Coast Guard stands the watch. From high seas rescues to securing our maritime borders, we are always ready.
But readiness doesn't begin on the water or in the air. It starts by developing the sharpest minds and most capable leaders to face the complex challenges of tomorrow.
The ultimate strength of the service relies on rigorous training and elite preparation. Now, that foundation of excellence is finding a new home in Birmingham.
Establishing the Coast Guard's home of the Enlisted Leadership Center of Excellence on the historic grounds of Birmingham Southern Campus brings not only an American institution to the city, but also brings new energy, economic vitality, and lasting opportunity to the region.
This partnership is more than an investment in our workforce. It is a commitment to this community. Together, Birmingham and the Coast Guard are shaping the future of national security, training the next generation of heroes right here at home.
Birmingham has invested in a legacy of excellence, and the Coast Guard is proud to become a permanent part of this community's future.
But more importantly, it means that Coast Guard success stories of tomorrow will be forged right here in Sweet Home, Alabama.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so delighted to be here today with you all. It's very exciting to be here back in Birmingham, and especially to be joining the Kiwanis today for this lunch. I'd like to recognize, I know we've had a lot of recognition. I certainly want to thank the mayor for his warm welcome this morning and his remarks here welcoming us at lunch. Certainly, in addition to Virginia and Daniel, I'd like to thank you both for your partnership and your leadership that enabled for the Coast Guard becoming a member of this community to happen. President Saxon, thank you and the Kiwanis for welcoming us today. Master Chief of the Coast Guard, Walter, and I are joined by other senior members of our team. I just want to recognize here at the front head table. We're also joined by Mr. Scott Lanham, our Director of Civil Rights, Mr. Gary Rascott, one of our senior executives, Captain Matt Brown, who will be the senior officer here. He's selected for promotion to Rear Admiral, and he'll be the senior Coast Guard officer living here with his family in charge of not just the training center here, but of all Coast Guard training operations, and then other members of our team that are joining us. We're also joined by a member of our community who was a career Coast Guard officer. One of my very good friends, Jack Vogt, with his wife Mary, are now members of the Birmingham community, but served a career in the Coast Guard, so I asked him to join us here as well. This is a remarkable week for all of us as Americans, as we are right on the edge of celebrating on the 4th of July, our 250th year of independence. Now, I am seasoned enough to have been alive when we celebrated the bicentennial and remember as a young boy what an amazing time that was. And I think for our America 250th, it's even more exciting to me as I think about the promise of America, not only for those who are Americans, but for so many in the world that look to America as a beacon of hope. It's also so fitting that I'm not in Washington, D.C. at this moment, but I'm here in Birmingham, Alabama, in the community, in the middle of America, the heart of America, and I'm speaking to a group of community leaders at Kiwanis, the largest, and I didn't know this until President Saxon's invitation, the largest Kiwanis chapter in the world, which is amazing to me. Linda Lee, my wife, her dad was a member of Kiwanis. And I think about the importance of what makes America great. And Alex de Tocqueville, as you may know, he was a Frenchman that early in the years of our republic traveled around America and wrote a book called Democracy in America. And one of the things he observed was the amazing fabric of society, of volunteers, of Americans that came together outside of government, bound together in a common purpose to make their community stronger, in business, in philanthropy, in public service in a way that wasn't always connected to government. And there is no greater example of that than an organization like Kiwanis. So it's really special to me that I can help celebrate my experience of America 250 by being with you here today in such an amazing organization. So thank you for your service to our nation as a member of Kiwanis, not only to the community of Birmingham, but to the nation. Thank you. What I'd like to do today with our team is and you saw a little bit of in the video, but tell you a little bit about not just what we do, which we've talked a little bit about already, but who we are in the United States Coast Guard as Coast Guard men and women. Because I think part of knowing our story, our values, and who we are is an important part of introducing ourselves to you as a new neighbor here in Birmingham. And we're so excited to be your neighbor. As Virginia said, we're an organization of almost 60,000 full-time and part-time employees, and then another 17,000 auxiliary volunteers. The Coast Guard we're a military service, but we're located inside the Department of Homeland Security. But we didn't start with the department, which is only about 20 years old. The Coast Guard started back in 1790. Alexander Hamilton was the Secretary of the Treasury. And after the Revolutionary War, the American people, always suspicious of a standing army or a standing navy, disbanded the Continental Navy. And there was no way for the young republic, the young United States, to protect itself against privateers, against smuggling, and to collect revenue, which was vital to the economic survival of the young nation. And so Alexander Hamilton, the Secretary of the Treasury, petitioned the Congress to form a small service of 10 cutters to collect the revenue, ply the coasts, and protect the young republic, called the Revenue Marine, because there was no Navy. And so that's how the Coast Guard started out in 1790, really as part of the Treasury Department, collecting revenue and defending the young nation. And then over the last 236 years, we've grown into an organization that has accumulated other functions and duties from the federal government, including our military role, our law enforcement role, our regulatory role, overseeing maritime safety and security and trade that's vital to our economy. And it's become the current Coast Guard of today. But we're very proud of our long and treasured history in a very same way that Birmingham is so proud of the long and treasured history of Birmingham Southern College. We come and we serve our nation with a set of core values that describe and are fundamental to everyone that's in the Coast Guard. Our core values of honor, of respect, of devotion to duty. And those aren't just words on a wall or a t-shirt. They are core values that we strive to live every day. To have the courage to live those values under pressure, at the testing point, and to demonstrate our role as public servants who serve the American people, who every day understand that not only is our role to serve the American people, but that we have a trust, a sacred trust, that we must keep with the American people every day. You know, Alexander Hamilton recognized that when he formed this young organization in 1790. He wrote a letter of instruction to the first officers of the Revenue Marine, what would become the Coast Guard. And he charged those officers to remember that our countrymen are freemen, and they are resistant to anything that smacks of haughtiness or insult or overbearing manner. That original instruction from 1790 is still the instruction we give to our Coast Guard men and women today. It's part of our bond we have with the American people we serve. And I think that's very important in knowing who we are. So why Training Center Birmingham Southern? The Coast Guard right now is in a period of extraordinary growth and transformation, probably some of the most significant growth we've seen in the last century. We've been funded to grow by nearly 15,000 additional personnel to meet the growing demands of the nation for what the Coast Guard does. Saving lives, facilitating the vital commerce that flows through our ports, our waterways, our shipping with the U.S. mariners that touches every part of our economy. It's vital to economic prosperity and our national security. And then protecting our border in America from threats, like the smuggling of drugs, transnational crime, and other threats to our border. And then being ready as a military service to respond to a crisis or contingency that may come without warning, including the Coast Guard's rich history of serving in every one of our nation's wars since we were formed in 1790. And so we train and prepare our young men and women to be ready for all of those missions. And while we have a number of training centers throughout the United States, and we start out, if you join our Coast Guard, you're either going to go to, if you come in and you enlist in the Coast Guard, you go to Recruiting Training Center at Cape May, New Jersey. If you want to become an officer, either at the Academy Officer Candidate School, you'll go to New London, Connecticut. But the next place you need to go is you need to learn your primary trade, your craft, and how to be a leader. And that's where Training Center Birmingham Southern will be for our enlisted workforce. And so what we needed as we looked at this significant expansion is we needed to expand our training capacity. And as we looked around, we realized that building a new training center, starting from scratch, would take about 10 years and be probably at least $1 billion. And so we began to look around for a place, an opportunity, that if we were fortunate enough to find, could be a place we could start with an advantage where there were existing facilities, hopefully that were in great condition, that we could take on and then move in and turn into our newest training center, our largest training center. And as we began to look around, we found this amazing story that right here in Birmingham, a Birmingham Southern College, a school that had an amazing history, not only for Birmingham and the state of Alabama, but for the entire southern part of the United States. That despite its trouble that led to it having to close, was being very carefully led and kept and cared for by President Coleman and Virginia and other members of the team, and a remarkable alumni network. And we went through a very deliberate, diligent process, one that required a lot of patience, Daniel, by you and the team, but it resulted in a decision this year to acquire the college, the former college. We could not be more excited about the promise of opportunity to turn the former Birmingham Southern College into Training Center Birmingham Southern for the Coast Guard. And as we do that, what we realized in the journey was that it is vital to our success to be able to preserve the remarkable history and heritage of this amazing institution that was Birmingham Southern College. And as we go forward and develop this into a training center and grow the training operations and invest and gain investment from Congress and the executive branch into restoring the college into what it will be, which will also include restoring it to its former glory, that we will be able to continue to carry on the rich legacy and tradition of the college and the community as we become new members of this neighborhood and of the Birmingham community. And we're very excited about that. And so the Coast Guard, although we're one of the 6 military services, one of the things that makes us unique is not just our size, but that we don't have a lot of big bases, that although they may be within a community, we put up big fences and we sort of have a self-contained military base. That's not our tradition. Our tradition is to be a rich part and a neighbor in the community in which we live and serve. And so as we come into and grow into our role as a neighbor and part of the fabric of this community, we know that we have a role to play as a good neighbor, as a leader, and also, like you, as a servant of this community. And we're very excited about that opportunity. So today, we have just really a small element. By the end of this year, about 50 Coast Guard people permanently assigned here, and we'll begin training operations in some of the facilities that are most ready to begin those operations. There are several classrooms and dormitories that are really ready to go already. As we look forward with the right investment, and we've got great support to garner that investment, over the next several years, we see growing to what will be almost 500 permanently stationed Coast Guard people and their families here in the Birmingham community, where they will live, work, and their families will go to school and be part of the community. And then we'll have people come in here and learn, our enlisted personnel, and learn their profession and learn how to be leaders, going up to a number of probably, at any given time, 12 to 1,300 Coast Guard students that are attending training here. They're in the dormitories, the former fraternities, sorority houses, and other lodging that are on the campus of Birmingham Southern, a training center, Birmingham Southern, and they'll learn their trade. And then as they learn how to be leaders and they learn their profession, they'll keep returning throughout their career back here to Birmingham, to the training center. So on any given day, if you were to visit, when this is a mature training center, you'll see very young Coast Guard men and women learning how to be leaders in their craft, and then those that are more seasoned. And you'll see this wonderful mix of people that return and call this training center, Coast Guard people that call it home, where they grew up, where they learned their profession, and they return to learn again and then to teach. And so this will be a part of not only the Birmingham community, but a part of our Coast Guard community. And so we're very excited about that future and the ability to travel that journey together as your new neighbors. So thank you, not only for your service as members of this community and in this great organization of the Kiwanis, but thank you for welcoming us into your community to be your new neighbors. We could not be more excited to be here and become part of this community. Thank you very much. Semper Paratus. Now, I know we have a little bit of time, and Master Chief Petty Officer of the Coast Guard, Walden, and I would be open to any questions you have today. Yes, sir.
The history of Birmingham Southern is to be filled with 18 to 22-year-olds. You said young Coast Guard people. What kind of age will they be?
Great. Thank you for the question, sir. Master Chief Waldron, would you talk about the age of people that will be here?
I would be glad to, sir. I appreciate the question, sir. Whenever the Admiral was describing how one of the key functions that we would want to use this training center for being leadership, on the enlisted side, that's something that never changes from the moment that somebody enters boot camp until the day that they retire. The way that we do it right now is that training is scattered across several locations. Beginning in basic training in New Jersey, the next leadership school that people are going to attend will be whenever they're learning their occupational specialty, their rating. So that could be in one of several places. For me, it was in Yorktown, Virginia. Several years later, the next leadership school I went to as a second-class petty officer was back in New Jersey, and then I went to the Chiefs Academy a couple of years after that out in California, and then the Senior Enlisted Leadership Academy in New Lunday, Connecticut. We've realized that there's a disparity here. We could absolutely benefit from consolidating all of those into one location, and that was why we wanted to treat Training Center Birmingham Southern as our enlisted leadership center of excellence. So to your question specifically, sir, the age range of the folks that will be receiving training here could be as young as the folks that are entering boot camp this week, or as seasoned as those that have been a couple of years removed from boot camp like myself. But that's what we really want to focus on, sir, is having that leadership training available in one location so that we can really just we can capitalize on having the experience of some of our more senior folks interacting regularly with our most junior crowd there. And that's kind of what the model that we're following with that. Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for being here. Are there any ways that y'all have already identified or thought about in partnering with the Birmingham community?
That's a great question. Thank you. So some of the first ways that we're partnering with the Birmingham community is, first I'd say partnering with the alumni from the Birmingham Southern College. And we've gotten a great welcome from them. And one of the things that we want to keep is a very strong relationship with the alumni community at the college. So for example, when we did the ribbon cutting last month, a couple of the alumni asked me, is there any way that once this is an up and running training center, we might be able to visit sometime? And we got into a discussion and we thought, well, there really ought to be, when we're running training operations, there ought to be a way where people on a regular basis, maybe it's a couple days a week or 3 days a week, where people can come and sign up, or there's a way that you can, without too much difficulty, get a tour to visit the college that you attended as an alumni, or even members of the community, and see the Coast Guard training, but then remember, yep, this is where I took college, or that was the dorm I lived in. So the first way I would say is with the alumni. We're also looking to connect with the business community here. We realize is that as we grow our training operations here, there will be opportunities for local businesses to provide goods and services and do business with the Coast Guard at the training center. So we've already held an industry day for those that have done business with the federal government before, and the next event will be an information session for businesses that don't know how to do business with the federal government on how that works, to make sure that we can give the greatest access to those business opportunities to local and regional businesses. And so that's another way I think that's very important. And then we also want to be very good neighbors. And so when families, I mentioned the 500 permanently stationed people that will be here, that's our Coast Guard men and women and their family members. So we'll have spouses that I know will want to work and be part of the community. Their children will go to schools here and participate in sports programs and other community programs. And then the Coast Guard itself has a tradition of outreach to local communities, like a partnership and education program where our volunteers, our members will go into local schools and help teach or read in those schools, or even maybe a junior ROTC program is something in the future that we might look to do. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Romney, thank you so much for your presentation and your presence here. We look forward to welcoming you as a neighbor. I wanted to say there's one person not here with us today that would very much have liked to have been here. It's our late member Dave Carter was a Marine and served in special operations. I was not quite aware of how special he served our country on several continents. But at his memorial service yesterday, it was a wonderful tribute to him. So I know that he is sort of looking down and would be very pleased, not only that you're here, he was also very involved with Birmingham Southern, serving on boards there. And so a great tradition. I wanted to ask you, could you tell us just a little bit about, from the, I'll call it the marine operations, folks in the Coast Guard vessels, where are the real hot spots? Where do you have the most activity, just so we can kind of understand? Because we think of anywhere there's coastline, you're in charge. But could you tell us just a little bit about the things that are most active today and most challenging?
Sure. No, thank you very much for the question. And if you weren't able to hear it in the back, the question was, can you tell us a little bit about where the Coast Guard is the most busy, or where we spend a lot of time doing work? And the way I would answer that maybe is to say that our operations focus on the U.S. homeland. And certainly that's the continental United States that we're all familiar with here, including the Great Lakes and including Alaska and Hawaii. But we're also located in other parts that make up the homeland. So our territories in the Caribbean, Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. In addition to Hawaii and the Pacific, our 3 territories in the Pacific, Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands and American Samoa, which range very far away from Hawaii and over the expanse of the Pacific. And then even up into the Arctic, north of Alaska, those approaches to our northern border in the Arctic. And then even in cyberspace, where the Coast Guard maintains a very robust presence that really connects the physical with the interconnected digital world that we all live in today. And not just from the opportunities, but from the threats and challenges in those worlds. So our operations are certainly along the coast in our ports and waterways, necessary to keep that shipping going that is so vital to our economy. But the Coast Guard also operates far at sea, because to protect our United States, we need to be present in the approaches far at sea. And so today there are Coast Guard cutters that are operating far in the Western Pacific, in and around Singapore or the Philippines, or in the Bering Sea near Alaska. Later this summer, we'll have Coast Guard icebreakers up in the Arctic, 2 icebreakers that are operating up there, not only to clear the ice and make sure that vessels that are operating up there have clear ice to navigate, but also pushing back against malign intrusions on our waters and our resources by China and Russia that are increasingly operating their icebreakers and challenging U.S. sovereignty up there. As we look to the south from the main United States, we see very organized transnational criminal groups that are continuing to smuggle drugs in the Eastern Pacific Ocean and the Caribbean that threaten our communities. Principally that's cocaine, sometimes marijuana, but those very well-financed criminal organizations then use that revenue from those drugs to produce and smuggle fentanyl in, some of the most deadly drugs that threaten our communities. And so the Coast Guard operates far at sea, thousands and thousands of miles from the mainland United States, to stop and interdict those drug smugglers in our law enforcement role, to seize them and the drugs, and then to take those smugglers to prosecution. And so we have ships and aircraft that are doing that very mission today. And then, of course, one of the main things we're known for, and one of the things we're most proudest of, is saving lives. And so we're engaged in search and rescue operations around the United States, even far at sea, even in other parts of the world, saving lives. And so that's an example, I would say, of some of the things we're doing every day. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Part of Homeland Security, how did you navigate shutdown funding, and how do we stand going forward on funding?
Sir, thank you for the question about the shutdown and how did we navigate the shutdown and funding, because it's been one of the most challenging things I think we faced in our long careers. As you may recall, as the fiscal year that starts on the 1st of October of last year began, fiscal year 26, the government was not funded. And then it was eventually funded in November. And then after that, there were a couple of other lapses in appropriations where most of the rest of the government was funded, but the Department of Homeland Security was not. And then most recently, starting in mid-February, the Department of Homeland Security was not funded for 74 days. And the Coast Guard was not funded for 74 days. And our civilian employees, about 10,000 civilian employees, even many who still did their work, came to work, were not paid for almost 2 months of that time. And our military personnel they didn't know they were going to get paid until the pay showed up in their accounts, which is, it has a devastating effect. These are young Americans that have decided to join and serve their country, and they could be doing other things and getting more money. They have families, and yet they didn't know whether they were going to get paid at every 2 weeks. We were finally able to see Congress act, and the president pushed very hard for Congress to act and fund the government, and we emerged from that. But it is one of the most destructive things to our readiness and our operations. And so the Master Chief Pettis of the Coast Guard and I spent a lot of time on Capitol Hill talking with senators and representatives about the need to keep the Coast Guard funded, and we're continuing that because we certainly don't want that to happen again. And so thank you for the question, because most of the threats and challenges we really are focused on tackling are from, it could be a natural disaster, or it could be a criminal group or a state actor that may threaten us, and that we train for. But we don't really train and plan for how to deal with a situation where we're not funded and not paid. And so that's been a big challenge, and we hope that won't continue to be one, but thank you for asking for it, because it's important people know how damaging it can be. Yes, sir.
Thank you for helping us landlubbers understand why Birmingham Southern was attractive to you, since we don't have a coast. And we do understand the leadership component, the classroom component. One thing that I haven't seen publicly touched on is the aerial component of the Coast Guard. And one thing we do have is a pretty full area. Is that in your plans at all, or are you strictly kind of a classroom, campus type training facility?
Well, so thanks for the question. Are there other opportunities where we would do training outside of a classroom environment? And maybe something like aviation was the question. And although our largest aviation training center is just a little bit down the road in Mobile, Alabama, and will remain there, we will do some training that is beyond the classroom. And when Secretary Mullen, the Secretary of Homeland Security, was here for the ribbon cutting, I think either in his remarks inside the athletic center, maybe at the ribbon cutting, maybe afterwards at the press event, he made a comment about maybe looking at Coast Guard Training Center Birmingham Southern for some of our unmanned aerial system or counter UAS operations and training. And that really got my interest. Because one of our enlisted specialties that's brand new is called robotics and autonomous systems. So we're going to train people in how to be experts in that. And I think that there's a classroom component to that, but there's an actual field component to that. And so we're already looking at how could we do that type training on the campus. And so I think there's a great opportunity in that area, maybe autonomous systems and maybe UAS or counter UAS. And so we're looking at that because there's some great spaces on the campus that may offer us that opportunity. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
As you were talking about everything that the Coast Guard does, I was surprised to hear the cybersecurity. Could you explain a little more about what you're doing to protect our country and our businesses against cyber threats?
Great. Thank you for the question about what the Coast Guard does in cyberspace. I was privileged to be a prior commander of our Coast Guard Cyber Command. At that time, about 10 years ago, we had about 200 people doing full-time cyber operations. Now we have almost 1,000, just to give you a sense of how much we've grown. Every organization in business and in government has to protect their own network, so that's part of what we do. But Coast Guard Cyber Command does much more than that. First of all, we have to make sure that we protect critical infrastructure of our nation's ports and waterways. So you may have heard that most of the cranes that move containers in all of our ports are made, about 80% are made by a company in China called ZPMC. I don't remember that's the acronym for it. They make most of the container cranes in the world for port facilities, and it's a Chinese company. And we're very concerned about the vulnerabilities that in the supply chain for those cranes. It's just one example. And so the Coast Guard, unlike any of the other services, has unique authority to go out on U.S. critical infrastructure and operate to help industry with assessing whether there's a threat, and then to hunt for an adversary in their networks, and then to harden and protect those networks from cyber attack. And we've done that even beyond port infrastructure. We've helped the Department of Homeland Security with energy and water infrastructure throughout the United States and even outside the United States. And so there's a growing demand for what our Coast Guard does in cyberspace to protect not only the physical infrastructure, but the digital and the logical infrastructure as well. And that's a very fast-growing area of what we do. Thank you. Yes, sir.
The two Coast Guard facilities in Mobile have retail operations, like a commissary.
Yes, sir.
I'm wondering if you all have plans for retail operations here, or will you people have to live on the common?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question. I'm going to ask our Master Chief Petty Officer of the Coast Guard to talk about that.
Thank you, sir. So just last week, we had representatives come from the Community Services Command, who is in charge of our exchange operations, and they were here on board the training center last week, kind of taking a look and figuring out what would right look like for our folks there. That would be for an exchange. Regarding a commissary, that one looks a little bit different for the Coast Guard. We don't tend to have a whole lot of commissaries. I think, in fact, there's only one that I know of that is specific to a Coast Guard base. Generally speaking, our folks do tend to live out in town and shop out in town, but we are already taking a look at what can we provide for our people that we're going to have stationed here.
Yes, sir.
Will your presence in Birmingham contain an aviation wing, and if so, do you find our facility, the airport, welcoming to a multiplicity of helicopters and Coast Guard aircraft?
Well, sir, thank you. I think most of our aviation training will continue to happen down in Mobile, but we will have aircraft come in and out of here certainly more often. And I think where we see the greatest opportunity is in some of our autonomous systems training, maybe for training of our autonomous systems operators for small UASs, and how we do that. I mentioned we have part of our Coast Guard are 17,000 auxiliarists. These are volunteers. They're civilians that volunteer. They go through a little bit of training, and they actually wear a uniform that's very similar to mine, but they're fully part of our team. And many of them actually operate and own their own private aircraft. We pay for the fuel and the maintenance, and then they fly missions for us. They're Coast Guard auxiliary pilots. And so we may see more of them operating out of the airport at some point here too. Thank you.
Got time for one more quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
So the 500 officers that will be living here with their families, what's the term length until they'll be in Birmingham?
So how long will the folks that are here be in Birmingham? The typical tour length is going to be 3 or 4 years, I think. And so someone will come into the area and then they'll stay for typically 3 or 4 years and with their family. And then they may leave and then they may come back. What you find most often where we have a concentration of a lot of people is when someone comes and is assigned here, they may often want to buy a home and be part of the community and put down roots because they know, although the Coast Guard may send them to another assignment, they're probably going to have an opportunity to come back here at some point. And so we've got concentrations of places where people just decide, wherever I'm done with the Coast Guard, this is going to be my home. I think Birmingham's going to be near the top of the list. We already have a long list of people that have decided they want to change where they want to go and asked to go to Birmingham. It's probably going to, the only other place I think is Kodiak, Alaska, which is also very popular, but a little harder to get to and from. But I think Birmingham is going to be one of the places that you're going to find Coast Guard men and women with their families decide, whenever I'm done doing Coast Guard, I want to end up here. Thank you very much on behalf of our entire team. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So much. I want to keep a military man on schedule. Thank you for being with us. Welcome to Birmingham. And when you get that senior team here, some of those people might like a civic home to come to hear good speakers. They are welcome to come to this club.
Great, John. Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Thank you, Mr. President. Virginia, thank you so much. Thank you.
Folks, I'm sorry to have to cut that short, but Admiral's got to get on a plane and get back to D.C.